bit of background about myself. For those of you who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting so far, I went to MIT for undergrad, studied economics and business at Sloan, was a teaching assistant for one of the MBA courses as an undergrad, took a lot of MBA classes myself, and then I went to Wharton for the MBA. Picked Wharton because when I was in high school, actually I took a couple summers of economics classes at Wharton, really liked the curriculum and wanted to go back for the MBA. My thought was I would go into real estate development. So went to Wharton for the MBA. I founded Personal MBA Coach there. A couple of my good friends were applying to schools, a guy from India and a woman from China. They each used other admissions consultancies to help them with their applications. They had a bit more standard processes, let's say large teams of consultants. They were paired with one of the consultants from the team. They worked part-time on the applications. I thought they were pretty good, but they lacked a little bit of personality and character in the apps, and long story short, ended up just redoing them with them, and they each actually got into Harvard, and then another friend got into Wharton, and we just sort of expanded from there. And now here we are years later. I'm on the board of directors for the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants, which is a group of 7 board members globally that work pretty closely with admissions directors. We have an annual conference every year with the heads of admissions for all the top schools. And typically I would do a couple things at the conference. I would give them a presentation, tell the directors the results of this applicant survey we do, and help them to think through their recruiting and yield. Then we do this mock evaluation session where we're analyzing profiles and debating who gets accepted and rejected and why. So it's a nice behind the scenes look into the process to see how they make their admissions decision. So we have a 96% success rate, and last year it's actually over $6 million in scholarships that our folks received. Have different rankings on some other websites that you may or may not have seen. So a little bit more about what we do, and then we'll get into the meat of the presentation as far as the advice for you. So we have complete tutoring. I have about 10 tutors on our team, in-house software that we use to guide through the tutoring sessions with modules, sample questions, thousands of answers, 4 full-length exams. And the reason our tutoring is pretty different from what else is out there in the space is we're somewhere in between a large firm and a small firm. The tutoring is also very customized. So all of our services are guaranteed. Happiness, you spend a couple weeks with us, make sure that you're happy. If not, full refunds for everything. Nobody ever asked for that, but it's just sort of something that we do. And our clients do really well on the tutoring. So you're using like Zoom, whiteboard sharing platform, screen share, that sort of thing. And people are generally doing like 2 to 5 hours a week of tutoring, raising their scores on average of 90 points. But again, a lot of people raise quite a lot more than that. We do have former M7 admissions directors on our team, and we help people throughout the entire life cycle. So if you're early in the process and you're not really ready to start your application journey just yet, that's fine. We help you through early MBA planning, which is basically strategic guidance and advice for what you can do between now and when you're ready to apply. Then we have former interviewers on our team to help with interview prep, and former clients to network with at all of the top schools. So Pitfall 1 is illogical career goals. Now, if you're changing your career after business school, right, you're like a lot of other people, right? Most people change at least something, whether it's 1, industry, 2, function, 3, geography, or 4, language. Those are the 4 different ways that you can make a pivot. So if you are making some of these changes, then you want to make sure that the change is clear. Now, this doesn't mean you have to write boring goals, but at the end of the day, making large changes in your goal statement doesn't actually help you to get into business school. And so one of the, misunderstood things that I hear applicants tell me sometimes is, well, I want my goals to be as aggressive as they can be because that means I will be more likely to get accepted. And it doesn't actually work that way, right? If you write something that's just sort of easy to do, right, easy to accomplish, you actually in some ways are more likely to get accepted to school. So I know that might kind of go against something that you think. But anyway, if you are making a change, just make sure that there's a reason behind that. So if you are, making some large changes, maybe there's a reason because perhaps you want to get into healthcare and, a family member experienced something health related. And so you want to make sure that you can, do something that that will enable you to like help them further on down their line. Okay, so maybe that's the reason. In general, and I like not to read the slides too much, but this one's worth reading. In general, be decisive and specific. The reason this is important if you don't know what you want to do, a lot of people have no idea what they want to do. You still want to paint a picture that's super clear to the admissions team, because they believe that if you show them a clear path, then you'll be able to get there. And if you don't end up getting there, then you'll be able to get somewhere else. So you don't want to be wishy-washy and say, well, I'm doing this, and I know I really want to impact people in XYZ. I'd like to change the world, and I'll figure out how I will do that in business school. You want to be super specific. Here's what I'm doing, and this is what I want to do later on. Okay, great. So next is asking your company CEO to write your recommendation letter. This doesn't mean that you cannot ask your company CEO to write the rec letter, to be clear, right? If that person is a great person to write the letter, then absolutely, let's ask her to write the letter, or let's ask him to write the letter. But you don't have to ask somebody who is a very, let's say, senior person. The only things that really matter are specificity, level of detail, and how good the letters are. So at Personal MBA Coach, what we do to help with the recommendation letters is, we first of all can help applicants to select the recommender. Then we help them to think through what key points they should write to make sure that what they write is really complementing the rest of the application. So you have a little bit of like strategic guidance, from us. Then we'll even review the letter and we'll make some comments for how it can be improved. So there's a lot of, let's say, input from our side. But what this means is the letters are all really, really strong. So next is using job description bullets in your resume. I'll probably go over this somewhat quickly, but the reason this is a pitfall is because the resume really should be interesting, right? It should be engaging. So focus on results, focus on key takeaways, transferable skills. This is what is important in the resume. And if you feel like it's too industry specific, we'll talk about buzzwords a bit later on, but try not to make it too industry specific. One of the big differences between a job resume and an MBA resume is that the MBA resume is a little bit kind of generic. It's a little bit, sort of catch-all. So next pitfall is not including school specifics. So whether it's Kellogg and you're talking about marketing classes, or MIT and innovation or something like that, right? Make sure that you're being very, very specific, because if you write something that's kind of generic, or maybe it's, Harvard, and you talk about the case method, right? Everybody knows that Harvard has the case method. Darden has a case method. What does that mean for you, right? So why are we writing about that? If you're writing about case method, and don't just say, I want to go to Darden because they're fantastic case method, say why, like why does that matter for you? And really connect the dots between what you've done, what the school will do for you, specifically kind of related to what you've done before. Try not to compliment a school. One of two things happens if you compliment a school. One, the school knows that they're great at something, and you're just wasting time writing about that. Or two, maybe they're not so great, and you talk about, the amazing healthcare opportunities at XYZ school, and they're like, actually, we kind of suck at healthcare, and that's cool that you want to come here, but I don't know if that's what I want to see you kind of like lead with. And then the only other thing that I would say is, depending on the school, you might want to talk about the value that you'll add on campus. And I say depending on the school, because if a school doesn't ask about why MBA and why that school, then maybe don't write about that. So pitfall 5 is having a vague reason for wanting an MBA. Now, this is not pitfall 1, which was illogical career goals, right? So career goals are what you want to do after the MBA. And then this is the reason for why you want to get the MBA. So you want to have this like 60-second elevator pitch for like, here's what I've done before, here's what I want to do, and here's what the school will do to help me to get there. So again, like being super specific, things like, business fundamentals and strong knowledge don't really help you. Instead, you want to be super specific for what the school will do for you. Now, don't be afraid to admit fault or admit, lack of abilities in a certain area. So if you've done a lot of like marketing work, you've had, 6 years of great startup experience out West, and you've gone from sales coordinator to marketing to head of marketing, and now you really never run a P&L. You haven't really like analyzed things from a financial standpoint. You've been focused more on the marketing end, and someone else handles the finances. Now you want to develop that analytical aptitude. You can certainly talk about the gap that you have, and why you want the school to help you with that gap, especially if your quant score is low. It's actually nice because it would sort of make sense. Pitfall 6 is not answering the question. So you have to answer the question asked. And the reason this is in there is not so that you close the screen and say, who's this guy Scott from Personal MBA Coach? And why is he talking about answering the question? It's because a lot of people actually don't answer the question as we want them to answer. So part of this is you sort of need to have a consultant to tell you exactly what the schools are looking for. And because I'm friends with all these admissions directors, have a sense for what they want, and we travel to a lot of these different events together. But also, even without using a consultant, really just directly answer the question that's being asked. So let's take an example like Columbia Business School that asks for 500 words about what you want to do post-MBA. Now, in that question, they even give you a hint. And the hint is basically, don't tell us a lot about what you've done. We've seen it. We don't want to hear about it again. Some people still will write 150, 200 words background, right? It's too much. Anything more than 70 words is not okay for that, particular essay. And if a school is not asking you about why you want to go to that school in the question, let's take Kellogg, don't write about it. And there's actually some different kind of notions out there in the space. I read a blog article last year about writing about Kellogg in the essays. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense because they don't ask you about Kellogg. So we sent 27 people to Kellogg last year. Nobody wrote about Kellogg anywhere in their application at all. The word Kellogg did not exist. And so you really want to think about, if you want to do well, just answer the question asked. And if you feel like you're telling them something that, you want to tell them that feels like interesting, this is what an optional essay is for, right? If there's something that you really, really need to tell them. But otherwise, just try to answer the question that's asked. Next pitfall is using too many buzzwords. I'll clarify just in case. A buzzword is a term that, you might only know if you're in your industry and not in any other industry. So buzzwords aren't good because one, the person reading the applications just might not actually understand it, right? Or even if they do understand it, which is more likely, it's more likely that they understand it than that they don't understand it, but they might not need to understand it, right? So what that means is if you're going to an event, you're all standing on a field 6 feet away from someone else and it's a happy hour, you won't get into the nitty-gritty details, right, about what you do sort of day in and day out at work. It's more so like the kind of overall high-level generic description. And so you don't want to use a lot of buzzwords. That also means that you have to talk about what you're doing in clear and concise ways. So if you're writing essays and your answers to the questions are, more than 30 words in a sentence, then your sentences are probably too long. So conciseness and brevity is really important. So next is lack of consistency across the application. So it's important to paint a clear picture, throughout the process, right? All of your pieces should fit together, including the LORs. You want to show them what makes you unique and have a theme that guides you through. And what this means, though, is this doesn't mean that you want, too much repetition, because what happens is you have so many questions and so many different pieces. You have the recommendations, you have maybe one essay, maybe two essays, maybe three essays. If you tell the same story in multiple places, then they don't get to see enough about you. So I'd rather have an A story and a B story than the A story told twice. And last is not properly engaging with the school. Go into, talk to other schools, ask them questions. This is an old slide, visit when reasonable, don't visit. It's not reasonable to visit, so that's not relevant. But certainly, talk to students. Students are the best people to talk to. So this is a sample of where some of our clients have got accepted to. We send people to all the top programs. It's not just MBA. So if you're thinking of public policy programs or law or Masters of Analytics, we send people to all the top schools. And our clients get more scholarships than any other firm in the industry. A lot of full rides as well. So we go through the whole process from GMAT tutoring with our in-house software. We're driving through the sessions with modules, sample questions, thousands of answers, full-length exams. Then we do brainstorming where we figure out what's your story about. What should we cover in the essays, the resume, the rec letters. We'll go through school selection, selecting the right schools. Usually people are going for between 5 and 7 schools, maximize the chances of getting in. We do resume work to make it ready for business school, to remove some industry context and focus on high-level takeaways. Most of the work happens through the essays. We use a project management tool where we have calendars, deadlines, tasks, reminders, and we do kind of as much editing as needed. We have graduate English professors on the team that teach creative writing. And so you'll always have one of them as the main editor, nitty gritty day in and day out to be perfecting the process. And we'll help you to select the recommenders and can review the recommendation letters. And we do mock interviews. So we have a lot of former interviewers on our team and interview guides for every school with sample questions that you'll get asked, tips and tricks for how to approach the interview. And we do interviews. And if it's a group interview, then you would have a group mock interview